Our guest speaker tonight is Debby Goodwin. I'm your host, Lynda Wylde. If you haven't been here before, I really appreciate you coming. And it's very nice to meet you and experience this evening with all of you. Debby Goodwin is a self-remembered alchemist, a healer, an empath who brings a higher consciousness. She is aided by numerous guides who are assisting humanity in the activation of their biosphere, from collapsing timelines to opening stargates and everything in between. So the biosphere, I know I'd like to ask you about as well. But hopefully we can cover that. And I have a couple of questions for you. I always start off with the question of, basically, please describe in layman's terms, what's the process of how you experience your gifts and so on. But basically for you, how did it all start?
Well, I was kind of a very closed down for a long time, so it didn't really start big until in my late 30s.
You had some experiences.
I had some experiences before then, but at that time there was really nobody to express it with, or if I tried to, I just watched people shut down. They'd be like, huh, like what's that? Or they wouldn't want to go to what I was talking about, right? I was always questioning things even from as a little girl. And I even remember my mom like, I don't know like the answer to that. Like I was asking the big questions about the universe, and so I'm like, oh, they just don't know anything.
Why did I pick these people?
Yeah, why did I pick these people? So then I just kind of thought it was normal, like whatever, I just went about life like everyone else. But I was still having a lot of experiences. But as I kept going, and
is there dreams or visions?
Yes, lots of visions, lots of dreams, lots of dreams that would come true. And it was those ones that always got my attention, right? And in that time frame when that was happening, I was playing a lot of sports, and all the dreams that were coming true, I knew every major league sports team that would win the year-end event.
Okay, so did you not bet?
No, I didn't, because I was just kind of like, oh, that was interesting. And I didn't even really associate it with money.
You could be rich.
And it was like, that was really fascinating to me. I was like, oh, like I would bet my husband at the time, and he always lost. He's like, how do you know? Like I would do like bets when teams were so behind the 8 ball, and I'm like, I bet you Boston wins the World Series. So take Yankees and go on and get the World Series. He's like, never happened. Boston wins? And I'd be like, so when I finally told him that I was dreaming who would win, he called me a cheater. That's cheating. And I was like, no, it's not. The universe was speaking. So that was, some of my little nudges in my 30s, right?
That's pretty cool. So dreaming visions in dreams?
I have a lot of visions. Most of my work is done on the astral plane. So before things happen for me, I actually see things on the astral, like could be a year before, it could be 40 years before, and then it'll come true.
This is you astral traveling. Okay,
Yeah.
so is everyone kind of familiar what the astral plane is?
No. The astral plane, it's just an extension of your physical body, so it's more etherical. For me, when I get into a dream, I know it's an astral dream because I'm actually watching something play out. So it's like I'm beside myself almost. So I almost consider it like an in-between state. So as the observer, in between, like I can see the physical and I can see the astral, and then I just pick out like the messages that I'm seeing in astral and kind of decipher it to the physical.
Do you think that other person you're seeing is your higher self? Yeah.
Oh yeah, but I didn't come to that conclusion until I think yesterday.
Yeah.
So.
I'm only 3 today. That's cool.
Yeah, so I've seen my higher self. I know what I look like. I'm completely bald, so that was a little shocking. I'm like, I have no hair, So I see what I look like when I'm working, but that kind of came over time. Like I just didn't one day start learning to heal and go, oh my God, I can see my higher self, this and that. It was just slowly piecing together. Is what happened.
And you had a vision about what this was going to look like today as well.
Yes.
A little foreshadowing.
In this last year, what I found is that a lot of people are collapsing timelines. So that's just old, a lot of old emotional memory. A lot of it's on the planet, but it's coming up to be cleansed. So as this stuff is coming up to be cleansed, it'll present itself. So when she asked me to do this event, I would actually be at the event, but things wouldn't be quite right. There'd be some emotions coming up, some people with a lot of DNA damage and stuff. And then I would see that collapse, and then I would have another vision. I was doing this talk again, but there would be other scenarios happening. I would be like, okay, this is different. But again, I felt I was the outside observer. And then I would get the odd message, and I was like, oh, I would find out something about someone that was to be here or that's going to be watching this in the future. And then I'm like, oh, okay, so that's 2 timelines collapsed. Then a third one came, okay, and I'm like, oh, interesting. So as all these old emotions from everybody that's
We changed the
participating,
date several times.
things just kept collapsing. And then the 4th one I seen, they were showing me that what was happening was the Stargate was being built in the room, right? So as things were clearing, the energy was becoming higher. And so I actually could see the portal, and yeah, I was like, oh. And then they showed me that, like, when we are often doing our work here on the planet, like, we think that sometimes it's of no importance, but they're showing me the other side of the veil, like how much it is important.
We think it isn't important.
Yes,
Yeah,
that,
but it is.
that they actually take records of how they're communicating to us so that it's easier for them to communicate as well, right? So it's not always easy on the other side for them to get things through, like they're trying. Like it's almost like a parent trying with a little kid, like, you know, you have to say please because of this, and the kid's like, huh? Right? Like, what do you mean? Well, for them, sometimes it's the same way. They're sending all this energy through and all these ways that you can heal and learn. So it's important to them that what they're doing is working. So when someone like me steps up and I'm hearing this and seeing this, then
Yeah.
it's a huge celebration on the other side.
Yeah, and it's,
Right.
so you go, you know, you putting yourself out there. A lot of people don't do that, and you know, you've got a lot of guts.
Mm-hmm.
So I really appreciate that.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
true. That's
people that
true.
do the work and do the talks. It's very brave and much appreciated. Obviously on the other side too.
Yes, yeah. It's, what I was seeing was that, like, people like me and other people that coming into their gifts or remembering their gifts, it's like they're stationed in towns all over. And then, like, we're starting to communicate, like, one-on-one. It doesn't need to be the big event, but little things are happening to synchronize each other. Well, as you're anchoring in that light, okay, and it's creating those portals of light, it's like attracting other people that are remembering their gifts and like, oh, right, I remember this and I remember that, and then it starts their opening. This is how it's waving out into reality, okay? It's not from, sometimes, you know, you get on YouTube and there's those big speakers and they got all the hoopla and the advertising and they're just going on really about nothing.
It's more grassroots.
Yes, it is actually, the transformation is taking place in the grassroots, not on that big stage like that. That is what I was shown is like our distraction. Okay, it's distracting us from actually going to the places we're supposed to be going with our energy field.
We're building a grid.
Yes, and that's how this grid is being built, right? So, and like for me, like I was extremely shut down. Like in my 30s, you know, I was drinking all the time. I had anxiety daily. Like I could not go a day without a panic attack. And I'm like
Which
why?
is very common for a sensitive.
Yeah, like why am I like so anxious all the time? Like I couldn't, like I just didn't feel right, okay? And like in the back of my mind, I kept like, there's got to be something more than this. Like the feeling anxious all the time, this isn't a life, right? And but I kept going. Like anytime I did try to talk to someone, they were more closed than I was, okay? And I'm like, okay, this just isn't helping. And it gotten so bad to a point where I just sent out a prayer. I'm like, that's it. Like, I need to know the truth. Like, why am I feeling this way every day? You know, I could get up in the morning, I might make it an hour, boom, panic attack. And I'm like, what am I panicking over? Nothing's chasing me, you know? Like,
Yeah.
it's just, I should be just having breakfast and going on. So, within a short time frame, I was laying there the one morning and I felt a piercing into my side. And that piercing, I couldn't even breathe. I was laying there like, oh my God, like it felt like a sword was being stuck into my rib. And at that point, I'm like, okay, that was a little intense. And like, it wasn't in an organ, it wasn't, I could feel it was the rib. And it didn't really make any sense to me. And I'm like, is it getting worse? All this anxiety, now I've got to think about this thing that stabbed at me, right? On top of it all.
No.
Yeah, like,
No, first my
it wasn't my intestines. No, no, it wasn't in any organ. And that's what I could remember. It wasn't in an organ, but I was still, I called it my first nudge in the universe. Okay?
That's a sharp nudge.
It was a sharp, painful nudge, like something was about to happen. It wasn't long after that, I was rear-ended and in a car accident. And at that point, now I had to go sedate. Okay, there was no sports. I had to be careful with the shoes I wore, with the pillow I laid with, the way I sat. And it was very uncomfortable because I was so athletic. I was very limber. I was like usually the person on the team. I always had the most energy, and then I'm just sitting there. I'm like, I just can't move.
Sometimes the universe makes you sit
Yes.
for a reason.
So during that period of sedateness, then I really looked at my life. I'm like, wow, this is just crap. Like there were some good parts, but I'm like, I just don't even believe that this is my life. Like, and then part of me could see that why I was playing so much sports, because I couldn't handle some things that were happening at home that I didn't like. So I just ran from it. Okay, so there I was on the run. I played everything 7 days a week. I worked out every day, and
Avoiding.
yeah, I was totally avoiding. And then that summer, I remember sitting there with ice packs all over my body. I'm like, I cannot feel this way. Like inside of me, I could feel like this energy needed to just go out there, but I physically couldn't move. So that's when I started, reading a couple of books, and the one that grabbed my attention was Going Deeper.
Yeah.
And when I read that book, and it was talking about the wandering souls, and it just resonated. There was this resonance when he spoke through those words, and I'm like, yeah, I feel really lost sitting here. And at that point, I was experimenting with different healing modalities and stuff. And so I kept going with that. I'm like, well, maybe I need counseling. Maybe I just really need to like talk this out, right? All this stuff that's going on, like my visions I have, and then what it's like in my life. So after 2 years of counseling, the one good thing that happened was they told me to journal. And as I was journaling, what emerged was 2 stories. Like the darkest, most negative side of life, and then yet at the same time I was having the most beautiful esoteric experience. And I'm like, how can this be, right? And the more they chased down like what was wrong with me, I finally was kind of to the point, I'm like, I could just keep going, like on and on, like this is wrong, I need to get rid of this, I need to fix that. But it was really leading to nowhere. And like, it's just like having a potato chip and not being able to stop at one. right? And just, oh, I'll just have another one, and I'll just do another release and see what happens.
Layers of the onion.
Yes, and and they had all the right terminology. They did the studying. I was being triggered. These were all conditioned responses, which was all fine. I could get all that. In fact, I read all the writings they talked about just to get a deeper understanding of what they were explaining. But this other side kept emerging. And at the time that they were doing that, I kept praying. And, it was just, I started calling in archangels and all this kind of stuff, right? And then I would wake up in the night and I was in a healing chamber. And I would be talking to angels, but yet they were talking about some of the most drastic, terrible stuff. They're making everyone I knew.
These are your counselors?
Yes, into like, they're my enemies, right? Mm-hmm. And it just wasn't sitting within me. So, then, at that point, around the 2-year part, I was on the coast, and what was really soothing was listening to the ocean every day. There was just this resonance happening, and I didn't realize I was resonating with the earth at the time. And the one night I was sleeping, and I woke up, but I wasn't awake. So I was like inside of myself, and I was actually bound. And then I did this like 180 in the bed, and that's when I had the most crucial vision. I had this draconian energy like attached to my field, and I could see it. And I couldn't move, and I'm like, oh my God, like it was the biggest cord coming into my heart chakra. And at that point, I'm like, okay, now what do I do? I'm like, I'm bound into place. And so I started pushing with my mind and my heart, and this cord just cracked, and I could hear the release. And at that point, like I did this 180 spin, and I could kind of feel my arms loosening a bit, and this draconian energy started screaming so loud, it was ear-piercing. And in my head, I could hear the sound was 1,000,000 years old. That's what I heard. And it felt 1,000,000 years old. Like it even gives me chills thinking about it. So now I'm facing the other way now. And I'm like, oh my God, like, I hope that thing's gone. Like, I'm just freaking out. And as I'm freaking out, I hear this deep breath, and I could feel fire coming at me, and then it slashed me across my back. And then I was told that is my reminder, that when it scarred me back here, to never forget that energy. So
It's pretty intense.
it was very intense.
Oh my God.
Okay, so when I clear things, I gotta go big. So I bolted up, and the first thing it says, I'm awake. I'm not going back to sleep. And I remember sitting on bed, like it was the middle of the night, and I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'll just stay awake forever. I'm never going back to sleep. And so at that point, I actually had a counseling appointment the next day. And I explained, I'm like, holy man, did I have the biggest dream last night? And as soon as I explained it, they twisted it into something totally different. And it became my mother. She's the dragon in your life, and that's why you dream like this. I'm like, okay, Floyd. I'm like, that was not my mother. Like, my mother, was a mother. She could do things I didn't like, but And at that point, I'm like, you know what? They're just twisting everything I say into whatever suits their desires. Mm-hmm. So this is the realization I had.
And you had been journaling about it.
And I had been journaling it. So that's when I did the reread of my journal. I was like, okay, like there's just something more going on. So as I'm rereading it, I'd like kind of go into shock, because I'm like, oh my God. So many stories were about being brainwashed. The pendulum swings, being split amongst myself. All the different things that they were hooking me in. They were playing bad cop, good cop, right? Like if I did something pleasing, they were giving me rewards, and oh, here, have this or have that.
Total manipulation.
They were totally manipulating me, so I'm like, oh God, now what do I do? So at that point, that's when I just pulled back. I could not even no longer listen to what they were saying. I pulled away from them, I got my own apartment, but I still had to go through a little bit of a healing journey on my own because I really was numbed out. Like my brain waves were just in a different place of thinking, you could say. If I was driving and if it was too long of a drive, I would just totally forget where I was going and I felt so lost. I'm like, where am I? And I could be in my hometown, but I couldn't recognize anything. I'm like, man, am I spaced out? Like, seriously. And that freaked me out. So at that point, I did do like slight research on brainwashing and techniques, and I found a beautiful article on it. Someone who'd studied cult mentality and stuff like that. But what got my attention is the steps to get out of it.
Oh,
I
good.
wrote that down and daily practiced it. You know, after a few months, I was like starting to even out. And that's when I was like, okay, there was just something really nasty going on there. And so I thought, well, you know what? I had archangels coming. I was in healing chambers doing this. You know what? I'm just throwing up another prayer. So that's when I prayed again. And I said, okay, I need a proper teacher, right? Someone who teaches the truth. And within a week, I brought my first teacher, my first proper teacher here, Jess Smith. I met her. And from the instant I sat down with her, one thing after another started happening to shed light on who I was as a being. The first thing was I sat down just for a reading. She's seen the two people, she's seen their energy fields, and she's like, whoa, this was not good. But while I was sitting there, it was like I could hear bells ringing off beside me, and I was like, that's weird. And I kept looking over like somebody was standing there doing something, and then I'd look back and then, okay, continue on, and then I could hear again, I could hear clicking and all these like whistles, and I'm like, what is going on over here? Like there's like a big party happening. And then she goes, oh, it sounds like your guides want to be heard. So that just stuck with me. So she didn't press me for any information or like, you know, all the details of what had happened. She could sense that I had no trust at this point. So she actually recommended I go to someone else. Like, oh, this girl's a great shamanic healer, blah, blah, blah. You know, I couldn't remember, I think Cloverdale this lady lived in. And she goes, oh, I'd love to work with you, but you know, you don't have to come to me, there's this lady as well. And I think I really needed that option, instead of feeling like she was just gonna look me in and I just had to be with her, and she was the only person that could heal me.
As soon as you come across anything in your life, as soon as you come across any kind of fear, then just look there. And
Yeah.
anybody's trying to manipulate or there's fear involved in some way, just
Exactly.
say no.
Where were you then? I'm just wondering right now. And it still took me a few months because I'd really kind of talked myself into going for another healing. I'm like, okay, you know what? Okay, I'll just try it, see how I feel the first session. So I made my appointment, I went out to DeRoche, and she was just going to do shamanic healing, lay on her bed, and she was just going to do some releasing. We didn't really talk about my experience. She did the release work, and I felt a little more comfortable. So she kept going, and I kept going like, well, okay, I'll see where this leads, but I'm not really going to open up yet. So I think by my third appointment, when I was laying on her bed, at the end of the session, I said, oh, that's weird. Like, it feels like rocks are sticking into me. She's like, rocks? I go, I know, it just feels like I'm laying on a bed of stones. And she goes, well, I have some crystals under the mattress, but she didn't feel them sticking into you. And I'm like, well, I can actually feel one at my calf. I could feel one poking my shoulder. There's one here at my hip. So at that point, I'm like, okay, there's just definitely something bigger going on. So I kept going. Finally, the one day I said, we had our appointment. I'm like, okay, I'll talk about these people and what had happened. And it was a decent day out. The sun was out, a little bit of clouds, but nothing major, but it was a nice day. And as I'm talking, the shadow comes across, and it's getting a little dimmer. And I looked out the window, I'm like, oh, that's odd for it to change like that. Then it starts raining, and I'm like, wow, that kind of came out of nowhere. Then it's like blowing. The more I'm talking, the more it's blowing. I go, it's what I'm talking about. Actually, that's what that energy felt like. And so I said, you know what? I'm just not going to talk about it. And I just, within 5 minutes, it was back to the way it was. And I'm like, wow, like, there's just something really huge happening now.
Words or spells.
Yes. So then, a couple more appointments go, and she goes, why don't we just do some release work on that? So we're, okay, I'm up for it. So she starts doing the releasing, my eyes are closed, all of a sudden there is screaming at her outside door, right? And this screaming reminded me of the howling of that draconian energy, but a little bit milder, and she bolts up, my eyes opens, she runs for the door, and I'm laying there and I'm like, just be calm, it's okay, like just be calm, because I'd already faced the larger part of it. And so when she comes running back in, I'm so sorry. And I don't think I put enough protection around the property. I'm like, and all I said is, I told you it was bad, about my words. And so then after what was happening there, she was kind of my witness to what I was experiencing, but on a smaller scale, so I call it the remnants of that experience were being released.
Yeah.
Then after that, she kind of became my guide. Like when things were happening, I would phone her and be like, hey, this is happening, what's going on? And she would give me a little bit of information, like, oh, you know, don't look up anything, just journal things down. And I'm like, oh, back to that journal, right? And I'm like, I don't know about journaling, but I took her advice. I didn't look up anything. I actually felt my experiences. And that was the biggest key for me, was to actually feel into what was going on and not listening to what other people were saying, right?
Yeah, not giving away your power to anyone else.
Exactly. So, and then that's when I realized like how much of an empath I was at that point. So I started to, the first thing that happened is my root chakra was opened, and of course I had to have the grand experience. So when my root chakra opened, I was in a forest, and there was this little baby wolf, and it was so adorable. I'm like, oh, you're so cute, you know, like looking at it.
Is this in real life?
This was in astral, okay?
Astral.
Astral. Okay. But when I astral travel, it's almost as clear as light. And so I'm like, wow. And then it turned into a wolf, okay? This big, giant, massive, snarling wolf was staring me down. I'm like, oh no, and I bolted. I never ran so fast through a forest while this thing was chasing me. I finally come upon a house. I think I ran 10 miles. I busted down the guy's door and I said, there's something chasing me, and slammed the door shut, and he just looked at me like, where'd you come from? And I'm like, I don't know, they were in the middle of dinner, like his whole family was there. So I'm not going back out there. You can't make me go out there. so that was fine. I woke up and it was so detailed. And then about a week later, the wolf had to sneak up on me because my field was so sensitive. And then I heard it when it was right here, and then it bit my root chakra, and I could actually hear the air escape out of my body. And I was like, oh, it got me. No. That's all I was thinking, it got me. But once my root chakra opened, then I started having the remembrance that I could astral travel. So that was a whole new thing, waking up in the middle of the night, standing in my kitchen and seeing my sleeping body across the room. Yeah. And I'm like,
bizarre, hey?
Oh, I'm out of body, and like, this is weird. Or I'd be like floating out, but I had no control, and I'm like, oh, I'm not going to get out of that door properly and stuff like this, and then I jerk back into my body. So this went on for a few months, and I was like, wow. And then I had this very strong presence in my apartment, and so strong I actually couldn't even go into my bedroom anymore. That was a phone call to Jess. I'm like, there's this presence here, and it's freaking me out. And so she says, well, why don't you play a CD with crystal music on it, see if you can clear the air. So I played it for about a week, continuously, 24 hours a day, nothing. And so I'm kind of freaking out, but I'm like, no, I'm just supposed to feel my experience. And I will roll with this the best I can. And then it was at that point more out of body, and then I was standing in front of the mirror, And all I heard was, don't turn around.
Oh, God.
And I'm like, exactly. Oh God, like what is in my room? Like I'm just freaking out even more now. Wake up, back to body, nothing. Just standing there staring at myself. And I'm like, in the morning, like that was so odd. To be in the bathroom looking at myself, don't turn around. So I had to look at myself. Then the next night, I'm up out of my body and I'm actually at my bedroom door and I know I'm out of body. I'm like, geez, like, and I'm peeking in that room. Oh, it's still in there. And I backed away back into my body. I'm like, I don't know, like what's going on in that room. Finally, it happens. I wake up out of body and Jesus is standing in front of me. And I'm doing this, I'm like, holy, like I'm looking up, but like seriously, the light was so bright, I actually couldn't fully see him. I could see his hair, but his crown was so open. And I'm like, wow, this is definitely weird. I know I'm sleeping, but, so I actually tried to stand up in his presence, and I couldn't. I actually collapsed, and I could see his feet and his sandals, and then I did one last look up with my eyes covered, and then he turned me. I did a 180, so now I'm facing south, and I could hear his breath. Took a deep breath in, and as he breathed out, and he was like blowing on my crown chakra. I thought I was just going to feel my hair, but that's not what happened. My whole crown opened, and the breath went inside, and it touched every atom in my body. And then I was like, holy crap. And then I shot out, and I became everything for just a split second, and then I back to myself. I'm like, wow, that was interesting. And so he just left, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't even believe it. Like the energy was so intense, but I knew like I was having a huge crown opening. And that only came after that root opened, right? And so then I'm just kind of laying there, and as I'm drifting back to sleep, all of a sudden he appears again, but not like so broad, okay? It wasn't so bright and shiny, but I could hear him talking, and he does a tornado beside me, and he says, just get in there. I'm like, get in there? It's like 6 inches big. I don't think so. And then I hear again, just get inside there. And I'm like, inside that? Like, I don't think so. It's not happening. And then I like, here, just project yourself. So I projected in, and the next thing you know, I was in it. And I could see like everything, like all matter, everything spinning really fast. And then I was told, just put out your arms, nothing will touch you. So then I just went into trust at that point, and I'm like, well, I made it this far, I'm inside this tornado, I'm okay, right? And then I woke up, and then from there, it's just been a continuous stream of visions after visions in that way. My next big thing was I started swimming with an Aboriginal lady I knew, and that would end up being my next big opening, actually. So
you just followed your guidance and,
yes.
and the advice of all your visions. And
yes, that's when I...
Step by step.
And that's when I realized, like, oh my God, I've been having guidance my whole life and just ignoring it. I had it like so on ignore mode. I'm like, yeah, it's happening, but I'm just going to pretend it's not happening. And I was having some very big experiences as a kid. I was not in a spiritual family. In fact, my father was an atheist, and he told us that every day, that there was nothing after, right? Well, I'm seeing the after. He doesn't think that way now, because I do see him now. So after, when I started river swimming, I just have to talk about the cold water bathing. That's when I started getting medicines.
This is a shamanic experience.
It's a shamanic experience when you start swimming like that, because that's when I got like the raven medicine to be able to fly properly. I had turtle.
When you're astral traveling.
Yes.
So you can get out that door.
Yeah. And so at that point, what I was doing was a recollection. And so it's actually a recollection of your soul. So I started going back through my experiences and like, oh my God, like this has been happening my whole life. So in my 30s, it had quieted down because I was really, I guess, distressed on this planet. I couldn't talk to my husband about it. And when I did, I was called crazy and this and that. Maybe I am crazy because this stuff's weird. You know, like nobody else seems to be having this experience, not on this grand scale. So I looked at my 30s, I'm like, okay, I was still having experiences. And then I was reminded in my 20s, I had a really huge experience that I just kept to myself. I told one other person in the universe, which was my mother, because it was so big and out there that I'm like, this would not be received well. But what had happened is I had an out-of-body experience when I was about 26-ish, somewhere in there. And I was in my bed. It was like upon early morning, and I could hear two people talking beside me and saying, stop her. And I'm like, stop me? And then as I was hearing that, I could feel myself float out of my body. And at that point, all of a sudden I was at the ceiling. I'm like, what is going on here? Maybe they should stop me. So I could see my ceiling fan there, and then I was like, hey, this is weird. And then next thing you know, I was in this layer, and like I called it like there's like some weird, actually the first layer I did after the ceiling was, I could hear the planet, like everyone's voice praying for help, okay? Everyone was crying and like, please save us, like somebody's help us, and all, like thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And like, it was just so shocking to hear, like we were all praying for the same thing, right? Everyone was asking for help. And then I hit the next layer and there was this buffer. Like there was no sound, no nothing. It was like this trap was sitting there. But then I'm like, what is this layer? And then all of a sudden, boom, I popped out of it, and then I was like in another world. Everything was so clear. I could see the sun, I could see the Fraser River, and all of a sudden the presence came to my right, and it felt so loving that I'm like, that's it, I'm not going back. And just as I was about to turn, boom, I woke up. And I was like, what was that? I actually, for 3 days, like my temperature was really low. I couldn't get warm. I kind of walked around in a bit of a daze. So I finally said something to my mom. I'm like, I had this like really weird out-of-body experience. And I explained the whole thing, and she casually goes, oh, you've had your calling. I go, my calling? She goes, yeah, you've been called to duty. And my mom never talks that way. And I'm like, called to duty to do what? She goes, well, to serve the people, right? And I go, oh, okay. And at that time, I had no idea what.
Never had a conversation like that with your mom.
No, I'm like, okay, I guess I'll serve the people. I don't know what I'm going to serve though. I like beer, so. And so after that, you know, I remember that dream so vividly and that vision. And then, so I started going back, and I'm like, you know, actually, I was astral traveling when I was a teenager. I couldn't sleep, so I would just go flying all the time. I'd see how far the universe would go. That was my mission every night. And then, the weird thing was, as I came back, I always came back the same way, and I would go into my body, into my brain, into my heart, into my lungs, and then I'd go back down to the smallest atom I could find. I'm like, oh, it doesn't end either way. It just goes on both directions. So that was the conclusion every night, right? And then I would recollect some more. I'm like, actually, I could remember being in healing chambers when I was 8 years old. When I would go to bed every night, I had a guy touch my shoulder, and my body would start vibrating. And it felt so comforting. I'm like, that's right. That was the same healing angel when I called on the archangels that came through, were sitting with me when I was a child. Okay? So then I keep going back. So this is kind of fun. You just kind of keep piecing your life together in that way. And then,
that's what you mean by self-remembered.
Yes. And then I remembered when I was 5, my reoccurring dream. And a lot of people have reoccurring dreams. And when a reoccurring dream happens, it's something that's going to take place, but at the time you don't realize it. And then the instant it takes place, you're like, or through a 2-year period when it takes place, you're like, duh, like, that's right. So this dream I had when I was 5, every night my bed would start swinging. And I was so used to it, it wasn't anything abnormal after a while, like that's how I went to bed. Just swaying back and forth, back and forth. Then this crack would open up and I would just slip into another world. Okay, and then I would be standing there and like, this is weird, I'm not even in my own house anymore. And then there would be this lady standing there, but she was 2, so she looked the same.
She was 2?
Like she was like 2 people, like twins.
Oh.
And so one was really nice, one was really mean. And she kept offering me a drink and I'm like, I don't want it. And she, drink it, I don't want it. Like I just couldn't trust this drink. And then she would keep pressuring me. So finally I would drink it. As soon as I drank that drink, my whole world started spinning. And I'm like, oh, I feel so dizzy. I'm just spinning. And then, boom, I'd end up in another world. And then I would always hear, you've been sacrificed. And then I know, but I was like, sacrifice to what? I was 5 years old when this was happening. Okay? So, and I didn't realize until in that journal when I was talking about 2 worlds. So I was walking my whole life between these 2 worlds. And when I had my wake-up call and was journaling, I'm like, oh, I've been walking between 2 worlds the whole time, right? So going to counseling didn't end up being a bad thing, but it was a harsh way to wake up. But for some reason, I needed to experience it in that way to be able to visually explain to people what goes on in our energy fields and what happens in our language, like when we're talking to each other. Because these people, they used language in certain ways to get me to think a certain way. And I could remember being at counseling thinking, you know what, I was looking at it globally. That this is happening with a lot of people on the planet where they're waking up, but they're so often told things in a language to keep them suppressed and just push away all their gifts. Like, well, yeah, that's happening, but I'm not going to look at it because it's just a form of like global brainwashing. So while I was going through it, I'm like, well, I might as well just cleanse it on a global level too. Because I was so shut down that it was hard for me to come out because I had no one to talk to. After my Jess experience, that's what I always call it, my Jess experience. So, like it was amazing. So then I thought, you know what, I'm just going to learn to heal. And then that's when my gifts all opened back up, right? That's when I remembered who I was on a soul level. At that point, I had so many experiences with kids. Every time I learned something new and practice on a kid, they instantly give you feedback loop. So, you know, like the scientists and people in this reality, they always want evidence. Well, that's your evidence. When I started working on my granddaughter, she was about 3 years old, but I was told that kids are more clear, so they'll feel things faster and give you feedback quicker. So I worked on her, and I'm like, I don't know.
What was she needing?
I was just working on actually anything general that might affect her as she was growing up. Like anything large in the reality, like one of the big things I was always correcting was food. So I would strengthen her to food. Like to eat a lot, to eat a little, to eat slow, to eat fast, to be neutral. And this was one of the courses I was learning. And when I was practicing it, I'm like, well, I might as well just practice it. I would practice behind people in lines, like rebalancing their energy fields left to right, up to down, up to soul level. Then I'd run back down and ground people back into the earth, and I would just run it. And then you'd see them shift, like they'd move a shoulder, or look a little more relaxed. So it was very interesting. So I just really learned to practice, and it became an automatic habit to just practice, okay? So my granddaughter gave me the biggest feedback loop because I was like, I don't know how much this is sinking in. She was in her car seat. This is how young she was. She was about 3 years old, My daughter's picking me up, puts down the window, she looks at me, she goes, no, I eat fast. So, I eat very, very fast. And I'm not actually catching up to what she's saying. She looks away, she looks back, she goes, all right, so. And I'm like, oh, she got it, right? So she got the download, just like that, right? Because children are more clear because they're closer to source. They haven't been bogged down with so much, so it's perfect time to work on them. Oh, did you want to talk now, Lynda?
I'm just wondering if we could go on to what you had planned for the healings. If it's going to time or any audience participation.
Well, we can do, like, if people want to ask me questions or you want more stories, it's up to you. So, what happens with me now is when healings take place, it's when you're in my presence, okay? And I'm a very humble person. So, because when I was taught healing was just to let source run through you. So, anything that's going to happen for anyone, any DNA shifting, it's either already been taking place before you got here or it'll unravel after, okay? And this is the way healing works because there actually is no time when you go into a healing space, okay? So when you're healing someone, they could see it in a year, and when they have the flashback of it, they're like, wow, I didn't realize that was happening. And I only know this because when other healers have healed me, I might not see it for a week or two, but then I'll have a total visual of what they did, the cords they removed. It will always be in a part of your energy field. This is one of the most important things I've learned. There is no time. What's been happening to me in the last couple of years is as I keep practicing on people, is I am in contact with my higher self, and they tell me where I'm from, what I'm doing here, and I'm just like a conduit of energy, okay? So I need to be out of the way. Just let the energy flow, and that's what happened. So that's what happened before I came here. They're showing me that the energy was already here, right? That the healing, like this whole room has become a healing chamber. Because when you're talking about energy like this, it reminds you of who you are, is what it's doing, okay?
Are we going to go through even like the motions of a group healing though, or what do you have plans in the middle?
I did all this.
You did it all.
Cut me off about there.
I cut you off.
No, I'm just kidding. It's about there. No, I didn't, this was just my grounding cord, right? Because whenever you do an event, like your energy can go pretty high, right? And Julie and I do healing circles all the time, and it takes me a long time to come back because what you're always working on is your spiritual body or your macabre. So when you get into these waves of energy, it becomes more and more expansive. And so then you just actually find you're not really on Earth anymore, you're just kind of everywhere, right? Julia's like, that's what happens. So in the last couple of years, it's been about realizing that I'm in contact with my higher self, but my higher self is actually doing work on other planets and other places, and I'm channeling that energy into here, right? And so now I've started bilocating, but I remember having this, well, you kind of talk to yourself when you're a healer, like you're talking to
Talk to myself
the
anyway.
etherical beings. But I remember strengthening other aspects of myself in other places to be strong in what they were doing. So once you start that looping back and forth, that's when you start bilocating. So you end up in different places, and then you're like, oh, this is me on another planet, this is me here. And you're just able to funnel the energy into a certain point. And that's hence the start date.
Okay, and how does it work here for everyone to sit here?
You can either call on it when you leave, or you just sit in it here and just shut your eyes, and whatever is for your highest good happens, not for mine or anybody else's. It's whatever prayer you want, anything you want worked on. And after you sit in there, just pay attention to how the field answers you back. No, that's all you do, is you just go sit in there. It is a chamber, a healing chamber sitting right in this room. So this is like, I never seen myself that way, okay? What happens is after I work on people or in a room of people, I get a glimpse, like it could be a month later, 2 months later, they'll show exactly what happened in this room, okay? They'll show if it was an emotion leaving, or if you just needed strength for something you're going to tackle, or if it was a past life, okay?
Can you see anything right now when someone's in?
I see astral travel. That's what I was trying to tell you.
Yeah.
I see things like that was the messages we talked about in the beginning. That's what I was seeing for the room,
Okay.
right? That's how you shift the DNA. Like it doesn't, I don't need to be involved in it, right? Because the energy coming from source is so powerful right now. This is what we're tapping into. This is what we're waking up to, right? So if you're studying healing, in shamanism, your messages will become clearer and more vivid. So I actually can't go to sleep at night without just having a visual. Sometimes I don't even know who the person is. It just happens. Other people will see me, they'll recognize me, and as soon as they look at me, and the way they look at me, I know they've met me already, right? On the astral plane or the soul plane. So what I'm doing is soul contact, right? To help everyone awaken to who they are, right?
Mm-hmm. That's what we do here. I just wanted to, these events are about just to affirm and affirm your own connection to your own life. So,
Does anyone want to ask anything?
yeah, we can open up to questions.
I'm just very curious about this, but I want to tell you an experience I had about 2 minutes ago.
Okay, awesome.
While we were speaking, this lady in front here with the hat, sitting in the front row. As I was looking at you, all of a sudden the most glorious gold hat that just surpassed her head was on her head. And when I looked again, it was gone. I have no idea what that means, where it came from. I have no idea.
Hat or halo or energy?
Gold, pure gold. It was very interesting.
There's some people like mediums that see immediately. Like I work with Julie a lot, and she sees like right away. Jess does. Lindsay's that way now, right? Like she's channeling her art. I'm more of like it seems like I'm a time traveler, so I can go back and forth through timelines and stuff. And
Activator.
yes, and that's where I'm doing a lot of clearing, a lot of activations for people. When the more work I do, the more past lives I see myself in. So, Tesla comes, he talks to me sometimes, he tells me that the Singer family actually guards a lot of the healing secrets that he actually had.
Singer?
Yeah, the Singer family, like the sewing machine Singer. So like I'll just get information like that. I get inventions, stuff like that will help the planet. Some of them are like healing chairs or vibrating chairs that you can lay in that actually vibrate your field. And while listening to certain frequencies, they tell me it's like the person's own guide shows up. And it can just free them because there's not so much interference, right? Because their body goes into a really nice theta state. And they don't go into that fearful state anymore. Another chair I've seen, but I don't know like how to build things, like the schematics of things, but what they're showing me was it has to do with the counter clockwise rotation and the clockwise running at the same time. And in a certain loop frequency, so if you're going counterclockwise, and traveling around the circle at the same time, you almost cannot hold on to your emotional body. Okay?
This is something that these inventions would
Yes, that just
bring your
happens.
energy field through.
Yes, I just start seeing visuals and stuff like that, like from other planes of existence. So they do exist and are being used in different places. And it's just a matter of time before they end up here, right? And then we'll go back to the beginning, like, you know, when people are talking about fearful things and it's always going to be scary, the one that's really on my nerves, like I've been working on it a lot, is the event is coming.
Oh, you hear that all the time.
Oh, like that is my pet peeve, okay? Because the event is happening right now, right? So as long as people keep saying that, and there's some pretty big people saying that, it keeps people thinking of something in the distance, not something that's happening in them right now, right?
Explain to what the event is.
The event is that we're waking up to all our abilities, okay? But certain people turn it into, it's about the government, it's about all the bad people. That's not what the event is. The event is realizing that you have all these capabilities in yourself. It's how your biosphere runs. It's how Kundalini runs in your body. You are a vehicle. And once you spark it up, you start traveling, right? You go to past lives, you go to future lives, and then you find 0 point is somewhere in between. Everyone's 0 point will be different. But when you feel off axis, right, you're doing too much traveling, you're not bringing yourself back and grounding yourself back in, right? That can happen to people too. Or you're going too far into the future, right? And if the inventions and stuff are coming through, they're already part of our atmosphere.
They won't for everybody. Some people just get their
They'll-
own inner guidance for themselves.
Yes, it'll be personal for everyone. Like I didn't always see inventions or this healing technology. Now I'm actually seeing even bigger technology than those chairs. I'm actually seeing phones that become portals to connect people to their star families. That's what they have on the other side, and that's what they're trying to send through to us.
You're nodding.
Right? That this technology is just going to, when they're sending messages, you'll just hear them better or see them better. That's all it'll do. It's kind of like a field enhancer.
And it's almost like Morse code, too, that's what I think.
Yes. When I was standing in front of like the sun, or you could call it God, like it's all different names, that's what I was shown. I was shown the tablets coming out of the maker, but I only got to see the one.
Is this on there?
Yes, everything's on that plane. That's where,
Just make
that's,
that clear.
yes, that's how physicality happens. It starts there and then manifests, okay? And so I seen the tablets and I'm like, whoa, like, wow, this is pretty cool stuff. And then I was looking at the one, it was exactly that. It was in a Morse code. Okay, so there is something to Morse code. It was dots and slashes. Not like, I couldn't understand what it was saying, but when I looked at it, it showed one of the original templates that came out for Earth. Okay, and then it was just a glowing light, and I'm like, oh, okay, so it was a template for Earth. Okay. And something that would happen on Earth. So it's quite interesting when you get into that.
Has this got something to do with the Akash records? The books that have not been read yet or been written yet? It's, as
Well, I
people
guess,
say,
yes, I guess that's up to
they're still
opinion.
in a certain spot.
Well, some people can access them. I only access them, I think if it's a deep soul wound, then I get to see them. It's like, I look at the astral record as that person's like deepest thing on their soul that they don't like talking about, they don't really want to share with anybody, so it kind of closes down that record a little bit. But once in a while I get to see someone's record. Not very often do I go there. And when I do go there, it's very powerful to see a record, right? Like you not only see the record, you actually get to feel that person's pain, okay? And when you're feeling something on that level, then you really do touch on the compassion that we need in this world. So when you do get to go to the records, it's almost, I consider it a sacred space for someone, right? And go ahead.
So, you have a question?
I have a question, yes. So, Bella, we have never met, but I work a few doors down from your shop.
No, this is Debbie.
Debbie?
The shop that we gave the brochures from.
Oh, okay.
She was kind enough to donate the door prize.
Oh, okay, right.
So we were
All right.
being kind to and giving out
Anyway,
those cards.
what I do every week is I have a Facebook Live from Whitney's books. And I give tips to people who are just starting out as mediums.
Mm.
So, do you have any tips for people who are just starting out and who want to get into this area?
Well, okay, that is a very good question. I like that one. I'm actually in the middle of building a website for this. Because what I found was the crucial point for me in my 30s is I didn't know where to start, okay? I had no idea. But one of the teachers I had taught me a priority testing where you test other people's fields, okay? And when you're tapping into someone else's field, the body will not lie. The answer will come up because they are asking themselves. So it takes the mind out and it puts them just into like a state of like almost wonderment, like all this can't work, okay? I'm building a site based on that philosophy. And that was one of my bigger feedback loops was after I took that course, I started testing everyone. And I just used my pendulum, like for yes, no answers. And I just practiced and got better at it. So in the beginning of testing, like you're so unsure of what you're doing, okay?
And you're testing someone's energy field with that.
With this. And so I would have a list and I would just say, give this person's top priority. But I wouldn't look at the writing on the list. I would hold the pendulum and I would touch. And neutral just went back and forth. My no was clockwise, the yes was counterclockwise. Everyone's pendulum will be programmed according to themselves, their yes and no. And I would just touch. And then it would start circling. I'm like, oh, okay, he needs work on his tailbone. And then I would do first, second, third priority. So what this person would need done first, and then second and third usually were something that would help that person on the first priority. So my feedback loop came like this. I tested someone because I'm like, well, this is pretty cool. Like, it's so accurate. And I met this lady, and I said, oh, I'll test you. Why don't we meet tomorrow, and I'll tell you what happened. So what came up was tailbone. And the other lady, it was dehydration. So I started talking to her, I said, well, there's something going on in your tailbone. You need a healing there. I don't know what happened, but that's where you need the release. And like her mouth drops open. I'm like, oh, I'm so far off. And she goes, how did you know that? She goes, I fell when I was 14. I was being chased by kids and they were teasing me. And she landed on a shard of block of ice and cracked her tailbone. So that was what was sitting with her, right? So that's fine. I'm like, the other girl, and I go, oh, and you're dehydrated. And her mouth drops. She goes, how did you know? And I said, I just asked the pendulum and a list of different things. And so I was actually impressed. I'm like, whoa, like this thing's so accurate. So after that, my friend Ann phones and says to me, I have a fellow coming up from the States that wants a massage. So massage was another modality I took. And I'm like, okay, so before I would massage people, I would test them. Tested them, tailbone. And I'm like, okay, this thing's lying because tailbone was the last one. So now I'm thinking my mind's in it, right? I'm like, there's no way this is accurate. And then it was shoulder counseling. So it definitely wasn't me because I would never recommend counseling. No, I would. There are good counselors out there. So I'm massaging this guy, and I'm like really unsure of this. So I just thought, well, I might as well just go down this road. So I go, well, there seems to be something wrong with your tailbone. And so I'm not telling him I've consulted with my pendulum at this point because, you know, he's kind of old school. I don't think he's going to take it well. And then I go, and then, you know, there's something happening with your shoulder and you should talk to a counselor. And I'm like massaging him, I'm like, and he goes, excuse me? And I'm like, oh, like this is it, I'm gonna get it. And he goes, who have you been talking to? And then I'm like, no one? Like, you've not talked to anyone about me? And I go, no, Anne just said she had a friend that needed a massage. I said, to be honest, I actually asked my pendulum what was wrong with you. And I go, I know that sounds weird, but I just took this healing modality and it said your tailbone, your shoulders, counseling. And at this point, he's not really on the table, he's just kind of looking back at me, this is weird. He goes, well, actually, he goes, when I was in Vietnam, a bullet went off and a piece of shrapnel got stuck in his tailbone. Okay, but it didn't sever the cord, it was just outside of it, but to that day, he had so much discomfort sitting, he couldn't sit longer than 4 hours. He always had to be up moving around. And then all of a sudden he goes like this, he goes, come to think of it, that's when my shoulder started bothering me. So just in doing the pendulum, that reminded him that those two things were connected.
Wow.
Okay? And he was like, oh, that's when it all happened. He goes, yes, that year I remember complaining about that shoulder. So whatever, with that injury there, which he didn't heal till he came back, but to have that shrapnel removed, it was spiraling up into the shoulder. And then he goes, you know, I just started talking to someone about my experience. I think I'll keep going. So that's how accurate that healing was, right? And are we out of time?
We are getting to the door pies and wrap up and the mingle, but we can extend the mingle. I want to know more about this chair and everyone's experiences in the chair. And if anyone ever has any questions for Debbie, that would be great.
Anything else?
You were just in the chair, so how did you feel?
Okay, well, it's funny that as I go in the chair, she's talking about tailbone. I have cracked my tailbone, and as sitting there, I always suffer from pain in my tailbone. And sitting there, I have the pain. I've got the shoulder thing going on. But it's funny because specific to tailbone, I've had that come up from different people many times. So it's just the timing is funny. So I just went into the healing part of it and just allowing whatever needs to be released and the healing that needs to be done and just be open to
Did you feel any sensations in your body at all?
Just pain in my tailbone.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
They are uncomfortable chairs.
And I don't feel it right now.
We
Sitting
have
down in this
cushions.
chair though, I don't feel any pain right now.
And you've been in the chair and your experience?
Oh, it's hard to put into words. My block is here.
Okay.
My location.
That's okay.
But I mean, I'm a pretty chill person, and it's just a natural state now that I've gone back to it. But yeah, I did notice a bit of a surge of energy and almost an opening in the crown. A little bit more, so.
Does anyone have
You
any
young
questions?
ones, do you have anything to say in the middle? No?
Just curious.
Just curious?
Taking it in.
Okay. I'll just tell an experience. Oh,
Sorry.
yes, go ahead.
I didn't want to say.
Her crown was
Pass.
blocking you. I'm just so you know. I just didn't see you back there.
How many people do you know here that you're really connected to?
That I'm connected to?
Yes.
Jess, Christina, Julia, these two lovely ladies. Kelly in the back, Nicole is my daughter. She has experiences like I used to have in my 20s, so I thought I'd bring her along. So, yeah.
Okay. I counted 7 for some reason.
Okay. I'm kind of like bridging people together. So that this is another thing that's been happening. I have amazing experiences with other people seeing me before I get there. And so I was in the mall, I'm at my granddaughter's birthday, and the young lady, she's probably 18, 19, she's cleaning the tables. And she's like downright staring at me. And I'm like, oh. And she cannot take her eyes off me, but I know like we don't know each other on the physical. And then she tries to do work, but then I catch her again just like honing in, and I'm like, oh, something's going on with this girl. So I leave, but a couple days later I'm like, I have got to go talk to that girl because something's going on. So I go back to the food court. Again, she's staring at me, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to go talk to her. So I go, I can't help but notice you staring at me. It's kind of obvious at this point. And I go, is anything like really odd happening in your reality? And she's like, I don't know. And I go like, anything like really like you go, wow, this is weird. Like, any odd experiences like that? And she goes, you mean like seeing the future, like seeing that this was going to happen? I go, yes, I have experience.
I like that one.
So I just explained like briefly what I do, and then told her that she is probably an empath, had her ability shut off at a certain point in her life, and maybe start meditating to reopen that door. And so I wanted, like I prodded her a little, but I didn't want to give answers. I go, did anything happen when you were young that you would say like was traumatic or like a really big trauma or something? And she's like, I go, there's been nothing. Like nothing, like I had my experience that happened. And then all of a sudden she goes, well, actually I started having seizures at this age and went on medication. And I said, okay, like there was something at that seizure point now. That's all I'm going to say, right? But I said, if you meditate, I think the answers will come to you. Mm-hmm. So, and back to when I was recollecting, that was one story. I did have a bad accident when I was 2. And I fell down the stairs and I hit my head. And I clearly remembered the whole thing happening still. When I stood up, I did see both worlds. I seen the worlds that my family was in, and I was seeing archangels and colors and all this stuff there. And then as soon as my father touched me, I came back into my body. And then I felt the pain, right? Like I call it like the pain of the universe, but I just cracked my head, right, against a cement wall. So, but there's certain things that can happen in your life that are set up prior to coming in, and that was one of mine. Because I clearly remember someone like talking to me saying, where's your family? And they were all in the basement, which I didn't really care about. But this voice was insistent. Where are they? So then I decided to join them. I'm here. So that was another thing that happened. And, when you see the both worlds like that, I think I was questioning everything from that point forward.